Police have arrested a man in Boston. Now he's charged with spying for China. The 64-year-old is a U.S. citizen. His indictment says he's been sending information on Chinese dissidents to Beijing, despite them living on U.S. soil. What do you think about the case? Let us know below and subscribe if you haven't already.
This program is brought to you by Preserve Gold, the #1 precious metals IRA provider. Call 855-962-3322.
Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A Chinese American arrested in the U.S. He's accused of spying for the Chinese Communist Party. U.S. authorities apprehended the man in Boston after an indictment from a federal grand jury. The allegation that the man has been briefing Beijing with a list of Chinese dissidents in the U.S. The man is named Liang Litang. The 64-year-old is a U.S. citizen. The indictment says Liang has been acting as Beijing's agent since 2018. Since then, Liang allegedly contacted the Chinese consulate in New York and started sending them information about Chinese individuals and organizations in Boston. Liang also allegedly sent over photos and information on Chinese dissidents in the U.S. Beyond that, officials say he recommended potential recruits to Beijing. Lastly, the indictment alleges during a rally in support of Hong Kong, Liang organized a counter-protest and that he snapped photos of pro-democracy protesters and sent them to Chinese officials. In response, a Hong Kong protester that attended the rally tweeted in response to his arrest, saying that she was relieved, outraged, and disappointed at the same time. Liang's hearing is set for Thursday. His indictment comes amid other Justice Department efforts to quell Chinese influence on U.S. soil. U.S. law enforcement arrested 2 men in Lower Manhattan last month. The Justice Department alleged the 2 men opened and operated a Chinese police station in the heart of New York City. That's at the order of Chinese authorities. The order allegedly came from a local branch of China's Ministry of Public Security, a government body in charge of China's law enforcement. The 2 defendants both live in New York. Harry Lu Jianwang lives in the Bronx, while Chen Jinping is based in Manhattan. Audit fraud accusations. That's what several Chinese giants listed in the U.S. are contending with. It started when the U.S. accounting Watchdog found issues in their audits. Those deficiencies reportedly totaling 100%. And that flaw has so far prevented these Chinese companies from getting kicked off U.S. stock exchanges. NTD's Sam Wang has more.
One of the world's big 4 accounting firms, KPMG, and several of its Chinese clients have come under scrutiny. U.S. Watchdog, the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, obtained access to audit records from the Chinese firms for the first time last year, following more than a decade of negotiations with Chinese authorities. The agency said it inspected 8 audits, though it did not disclose the listed companies. But Alibaba Group Holding and Yum China Holdings were reportedly among them. The deficiencies may raise concerns among investors over the accuracy of financial statements from U.S.-listed Chinese companies. In response, China's regulator is now saying it's willing to cooperate with its U.S. counterpart on audit deals. Sam Wang, NTD News, New York.
Chinese buyers were expected to jumpstart demand in full force after the lifting of the country's COVID-19 curbs, but it didn't happen. And to make things worse, export growth also took up a slow pace. Here's a closer look at the latest numbers.
China's latest trade numbers are casting a shadow over growth hopes at home and abroad. Imports unexpectedly fell almost 8% in April. That was far worse than economists expected and extended a fall seen the month before. Exports grew 8.5%, or little more than half the surge recorded in March. The weak numbers come despite the lifting of health crisis restrictions, and they will raise concern worldwide, as the import numbers mean the global economy may not be able to rely on China to drive demand. That's already showing up in other numbers, such as a drop of more than a quarter in South Korea's shipments to the country. The cooling export numbers also suggest tepid demand for Chinese products overseas. Beijing officials have repeatedly warned of a severe and complicated external environment amid recession risks for many key trading partners. Analysts say rising rates and the recent banking turmoil are among factors limiting demand in Western markets. Now China watchers wonder whether Beijing will step in with new stimulus measures.
An insider view from someone who experienced China's strict pandemic lockdown policy firsthand. A Chinese entrepreneur tells us how China's economic recovery is faring with 3 years of pandemic control behind it. Here's more.
From tourism, trading, and catering to real estate and rubber product exports, Meng Jun's business footprint spanned southern China with an annual turnover of tens of millions of dollars. But it all came to a halt when the pandemic lockdown took over the country.
I came to the United States last year. Since July 2021, basically there has been no work available for my employees.
Meng started laying off staff and clearing out goods at half price, but no one was buying because the consumers were facing the same plight.
I know some companies in our industrial zone were more burdened with debt than I was. Some owners suffered from depression and even committed suicide.
Things didn't turn around when the zero COVID-19 policy ended. Meng said a friend of his owned a plant making decorative materials. Before the pandemic, the friend heeded the regime's call to scale up production capacity. Now the real estate slump is taking a major toll on his business.
Policies like lower interest rates or purchase incentives are all lies. My friend's products are still piling up. Real estate hasn't recovered at all, as the Chinese Communist Party claims it has. The factories aren't even operating at 10% of what they used to be.
Another friend of Meng's ran a wholesale clothing business. During the pandemic, unsold stockpiles and rent payments cost him his entire savings.
Since the lockdown lifted, my friend said his business hasn't even regained 20% of its previous revenue. Not even 20%. How's the economy likely to recover like this?
Meng said Chinese consumers aren't opening their wallets due to fears like uncertainty and looming unemployment.
Everyone feels insecure in this situation. No one trusts the Communist Party anymore. The party just acts on its own whims and doesn't keep its word.
Official data shows a drop in China's manufacturing activity in April, with the property sector still floundering and exports fading.
The jobless rate is soaring among young people in China. In urban cities, 1 in 5 young people are out of work, and it's even worse in rural areas. China is feeling the effects of its historic population decline last year. Sales of baby and children's products are shrinking across the board. For manufacturers, the race is on to develop new revenue streams. Let's take a closer look.
Pushchairs, onesies, and cuddly toys. Items in the baby aisle are facing declining sales in China as more people in the country forgo having children. China's population drop is forcing companies that make things for babies or children to diversify or seek buyers overseas. Yang Zhang is one of them. She's the founder and CEO of children's clothing company Natchna Kids, which is now making more clothes for grown-ups.
We have
a lot of parent-child outfits. For example, a piece of clothing which I would previously only have made for children, I will now ask my tailor to make an adult version. Right now, the sales volume of adult clothing is actually pretty large. This is how we're currently preparing for the declining birth rate. We have considered making pets clothing as well, but our team is relatively small.
Last year, China's population fell for the first time in 6 decades. And in April, India officially became the world's most populous country. The knock-on effects have been swift. China's market for baby food and diapers is the world's largest, but it's expected to contract this year for the first time since Euromonitor began keeping data in 2012. The research firm estimates that the market will shrink by 2% to $37.2 billion by 2025.
Baby companies are going to face declining margins.
Sean Rain is the managing director of China Market Research Group.
For years, China has been the major growth driver for the world's largest baby care companies, whether it be infant formula or diapers or children's toys. What's happening is a lot of these multinational brands are starting to focus on India because India is still continuing to grow and has eclipsed China as the world's largest country in terms of population.
Birth rate declines are not expected to end anytime soon, with analysts noting young Chinese adults are not keen to have more than one or even any kids due to the sky-high costs of child rearing.
Is China a threat? The world's biggest military alliance says no. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, is led by the United States.
NATO sees China not as a threat, but as a challenge.
Admiral Rob Bauer, the chair of NATO's military committee, commented on Wednesday, saying the organization is more focused on Russia than China.
And the difference is, when we talk about these military plans, is that NATO is not working on military plans against China. We are working on military plans against Russia and the terrorist groups. That's where the plans are focusing on.
NATO is now in talks with Japan about setting up a liaison office in Tokyo to counter North Korea and China. Despite NATO's stance, is China really a threat? Taiwan's top official seems to have a different answer. Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen inspected a training for Army reserves on Thursday and had this to say.
Taiwan is at the forefront of the defense of global democracy. Our principle is mobilize on the spot, fight on the spot, so that everyone who participates in the call can have the ability to protect their homeland.
Tsai also noted the island's people have the determination to protect Taiwan, regardless of gender. A female reservist told journalists why she attended the exercise.
As long as it is a matter of the country, it is everyone's responsibility. So I am here to participate in this training.
In order to prepare for potential war, the training is being held in strategic locations. That's so reservists get a better grasp of the terrain and key infrastructure in the area they're tasked with defending. Australia's trade minister is in Beijing, and trade between the two world powers is up for discussion. Minister Don Farrell arrived Thursday to meet with his Chinese counterpart, both countries seeking to stabilize diplomatic relations.
There's no reason why we can't progress our national security and our national interest, but also continue our trading relationship, build on that almost $300 billion worth of trade, and stabilise our relationship with China.
The same day, a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said China is willing to work with Australia to deepen cooperation and settle differences. Canberra especially hopes to push for the removal of trade curbs Beijing imposed in 2020. They penalize Australian wine, beef, barley, coal, seafood, and timber exports to China. The restrictions were largely seen as a form of retaliation after Australia called for an international inquiry into the origins of COVID-19. Australian journalist Cheng Lei was also detained in Beijing on national security charges around the same time. Farrell said he was hopeful that with some goodwill, reconciliation would be possible, adding more still needs to be done. Trade relations do appear to be thawing. Australian exports to China soared to record heights in March, hitting $19 billion for the month. That's 26% higher than February and 31% more than March 2022. The month's tally is the highest on record. Copper and iron ore made up much of those exports, with Australian customs data showing roughly $40 million in copper trade alone early this year. China is Australia's largest trading partner. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 2 years. Here's what to look out for in our second half. Is the West helping the Chinese Communist Party grow? And how can the regime be held responsible for crimes it's committed against people in China, the U.S., and the world?
The Chinese Communist Party, as we put forth in this book, is a transnational criminal organization, and they should be designated by Congress as such. At that point in time, charges can be brought against the Chinese Communist Party, and the world can begin to hold them to account for their crimes.
Didi Lageson, co-author of The Indictment, breaks it down. The full episode is available on our partner platform, Epoch TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.
A performance that truly matters. For each and every one of us. This is what you've been waiting for. See it at least once in your lifetime. Get tickets now at shenyun.com.